everyone. I am very excited to be chatting today with Claire for the OWise kind of real life experiences of breast cancer. As always, I tend to start these conversations, Claire, just kind of passing it straight over to you and asking the question kind of when did breast cancer kind of rear its head in your life?
Yeah. So we're now in 2024 and it was late 22. So in October, I found a lump and I went to my GP, and quite quickly, with normal 3 weeks, they saw me, and by Christmas I was having chemo. It was not particularly advanced, but it was a HER2 positive. It was only stage 1. All the sort of grading, it's a bit of a blur. I mean,
Yeah.
I know what it is, but at the time you're just like, I'm not sure how to feel about this because everyone's being upbeat and positive. But I know this is not great if you're starting with chemo so quickly. But it was in great hands, and everything, you don't really know until you've got a response to your treatment as to perhaps what the next steps were. But pretty much what the surgeon said on that day happened, sort of almost like clockwork. So I had 3 months of Paclitaxel and Phesgo, and then the Herceptin carried on for a year till December, just gone. And I had surgery in April and radiotherapy in May. Yep.
So right now you've finished all treatment?
Yeah, so finished treatment, just sort of keeping an eye on things.
Yeah.
I did actually, because we've relocated since then, and we're down near Brighton. This week went in with a lump. I'd been in a couple of times this year thinking, I'm one of those kind of worry bugs. They're just going to be like, because my boobs aren't the same. It's hard. They say, know your new normal, but it's not that simple. And
Yeah.
and they ended up doing a biopsy, and I was really thrown. It took me right back to last year and thinking, this is kind of a forever thing now, right? It's not. And I've watched some of your interviews. I don't have the BRCA gene. I don't have any family history. I've got friends that have had it. Lost a couple of friends to it years ago. But even though you're close to someone, there's nothing the same, nothing quite the same as actually for yourself inside your head and with your body. So I was really hoping that once the Herceptin was out the way and I'm in menopause and I'm not on HRT, you sort of made all these changes. You're like, right, let's just move forward. A campaign, fundraise, support people that are going through it themselves. It's a bit of a roller coaster of a journey. You can feel like you're really grounded and sorted one day, and then something can throw you.
Absolutely.
So the treatment's ended, and hopefully the biopsy will come to nothing. But I think it sort of lives with you for a while. It's quite hard to shake it off.
That is definitely, resonating with me. So you're currently waiting on biopsy results now?
Yeah. Yes, they said it'd be a couple of weeks. I mean, they're really lovely. And my whole journey with treatment has been a really interesting one because I dipped into private because we had it through my husband's business. He left his business 2 weeks after my diagnosis, so we had to choose to take it on because within the NHS locally, there were problems with waiting times and some strikes that were going on. I was fully supportive of the strikes and slightly kind of like frustrated of the knock-on effect. But so we made the decision to go private. But I was sounds a bit strange, I was quite jealous of people in the NHS because of the wraparound care that comes from a multidisciplinary team. It's like you've got to become that multidisciplinary, pulling all the strands together in a private setting, and you don't get the lovely breast care nurses that, for me, really help with the emotional support. However stretched they are, they do an incredible job. So
did you not get a breast care nurse with your oncology team?
Really hope she's not going to listen to this, but yes, but she was she didn't function like one.
Okay.
She was kind of like, if you need me, you must call me. And when I did, she didn't have any of the emotional intelligence, I guess, that I needed. It was just a kind of very functional, what do you need exactly? And I wasn't able to sort of say, and I guess that they weren't there in any of oncology, none of the treatment. So it's all very dependent on who's treating you that day. There were nurses that supported people for treatment, and they were generally delivering all sorts of chemotherapies. They weren't just breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people on tap. And I think if you're not very good at asking for help, that was the missing link for me, I think, when you're, and I don't know this for sure, but the impression I've got from some people in the NHS is the breast care nurses, they've just I don't know how to explain it. They're like the sort of stuffing in the pillow, the sort of soft bits, the kind of,
Yeah,
it's
kind
hard
of
to define, but that
the
they're,
glue that keeps it all
yeah,
together. And
yeah.
so,
And
feeling that lack then yourself in a way during treatment, did you reach out for support in other places or spaces?
yeah, so I've got an amazing husband and my kids are adults in their 20s. So we did lots of chatting and processing, and therapy was amazing. That came sort of more towards the end of the treatment. Did have some acupuncture, so physical support that helps with the sleep, and then better sleep helps you cope and
Mm-hmm.
do normal things, and then that all feeds into how much you need the additional stuff, I guess. But I think I was really bad at reaching out for help because I felt like there are people a lot worse off. Come on, just dial into Netflix, sit on the sofa, eat well, look after yourself, get through this. I went into operations mode.
That's
And
a very common, I mean, even take breast cancer out of the picture, isn't it? To kind of be like,
yeah,
oh, I won't ask for help because someone else needs that support more, or it's not that bad, or yeah,
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of, it's hard to ask for help.
And I think on reflection, chatting through stuff with a therapist, there was a lot of disassociation going on, which I think is quite common. You're kind of, right, if I just crack on and get through this, if I need to deal with something, I'll deal with it afterwards. But then there's a whole load of backlog to work through. And I mean, I know, having dipped into therapy for years and having encouraged so many people to do it, my kids, friends, I think it's really amazing. But I do think it's quite hard to find the right therapist that understands, that is comfortable with some of the stuff that might come up. 'Cause I think it's really hard for the husbands and the family to talk openly about the fears for them
Yeah.
as well as for me, because no one likes to upset people, and everyone's got a different relationship with death and cancer and all the bits in between.
Yeah.
People often propel themselves straight to death, and there's so much life before that. And I think I was just trying to fathom how to talk about that through it, but for me,
Yeah.
it was a really powerful, the conversations I had with my children, and my husband. I couldn't never wish this on anyone, but they were really healthy and incredible for our relationship. So I'm glad for
That's
that.
amazing. And they were conversations you had at the start of your diagnosis, or kind of did any stick out in terms of throughout your treatment, were they, or?
Um, so I think, so my father died a few years before from motor neuron disease, and it was really sudden and really pants for him and for everyone because he was such a strong character. So I think a couple of us had talked about death a bit, and I'd become slightly obsessed. I don't know, because I felt so uncomfortable with it all. It was like, no, 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 this can't be happening. He's going to live forever. That sort of childlike kind of sense
Yeah.
of, oh, there's an end. So I did a lot of looking into being a soul doula. I did some training. I'd read books. It really mattered to me, my relationship with death, because of what had happened. And so we did talk about it, and I changed my will to have a Viking burial where I'd be floating off on a raft, and they'd have to shoot firing arrows. I wanted to make something about it memorable and fun. Because I think because we'd had those silly conversations, I felt like we'd sort of covered it all. And one of my kids in particular, he suddenly went into, oh, maybe a pit of despair is a bit extreme, but I think that's where he went, because he talked about it afterwards and said that with really lovely long walks in Richmond Park and talked for hours about where he'd gone And for him, he was scared of flying. There's quite a few things that he'd been really scared of. He's in his 20s. And then he connected it all to his fear of death and was able to go flying and all sorts of things after that. And he said that so for me, that was significant that strangely out of my situation, he faced up to stuff that he pushed down when his grandpa died, that this sort of triggered. And so I think also it's you suddenly realize how many people have a very fragile relationship with death and cancer, and it's so charged, and it's really hard to have a healthy conversation with people, or not a fun conversation, but yeah. So I mean, Copperfield had been amazing. Well, Chris in particular, the way she talks about it, and I love her approach, and we need more of that. And
Yeah, we really do. And I think when you get a diagnosis, and if you do kind of venture into the online cancer community space, so many people are talking incredibly powerfully and beautifully about death and dying, and these conversations that it for me, similar to you, like that became a topic I was really interested in delving deeper into as well. And I've also just finished training in end of life doula care.
yeah,
because not even necessarily to do it as a career, but more to just feel equipped with these conversations. Because, like you said about your dad, like you think, oh, they'll live forever, but this is not. We are all go. What is it? I think it's Ramdas says we're all walking each other home. We're all. There is only one destination we're all headed to, and I think a cancer diagnosis brings that destination, whether you're surviving your cancer diagnosis or not. It's at the forefront. And actually now for me, every day I think it's a kind of Buddhist tradition to think, will today be the day? It's keeping death at the forefront to live better, actually.
yeah.
So
And I
it's
think
interesting about your son with his fear of flying.
and I think that I found that balance quite hard, of not living today as if it's your last, because that's quite a heavy thing in a way, and it can be quite intense, because that then sort of puts a pressure on. But today I actually just need to sit and do nothing and feel quite unproductive because I'm quite tired. And how is that living my best life when there's a weird pressure that sometimes I put on myself, I think, and have to check in that just because I've come through this okay doesn't mean to say I have to save the world.
Yeah.
And just because I've come through this okay doesn't mean to say I have to campaign and fundraise all the time. It's kind of, I've had this opportunity to talk to some people that I never would have done, that have had a diagnosis recently, and talk to them like I wish someone would chat to me. So that's one of the most amazing things that's come out this recently, is realizing it's very hard to speak to somebody who's going through a diagnosis and treatment if you've never had it. It's hard to know what to say. It's hard to say, oh, it's really crap, isn't it? You know, kind of, 'cause sometimes there are moments, not to say that, and there are moments when someone needs to hear it. But if you've never had any treatment, it's not that person's fault. It's just, it can sound a bit not shallow, but just a bit light touch. And I think being able to offer people encouragement, just sort of solidarity, I think has been a really, I mean, I know you do that in spades. And
It's when I was diagnosed, it's all I looked for. And I say, I didn't even need to speak to the person, in all honesty. Just seeing people come through, it felt so far away, that kind of end date of getting through chemo, getting through surgery, radiotherapy, whatever else was being thrown at us, right? So just seeing people not living a medical life felt like, it blew my mind. And so I think that there is so much power in them being in the position where that it helped you to do that for somebody else. And I think that also is part of the healing process. It really helps to heal, right? Because I think as human beings, part of one of our amazing, I guess, not roles, that's the wrong word, but this act of giving back is part of it, gives us purpose. So I think that's an amazing thing to do. And I would say with a big caveat that you have to feel in a strong enough place yourself to do it,
Yeah.
because it does take time after treatment to get to that point. And I think that's, I don't know, how have you found, what stage did you start seeing your therapist during treatment, and was it a new therapist that you spoke with?
Yeah, really interesting. So I don't know why I remember February, but I think I had a meltdown on the nurse that was giving me my chemo. I just kind of kept crying. She was like, "You're right." I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "Oh, do you want to see someone?" And do you want to obviously talk to a therapist? And I think because it was through private healthcare, it was someone in Harley Street, and it was just a hilarious amount of money that I couldn't get signed off. So I went off to find someone, and I think it took till September or October till I saw someone. So my need had completely changed by then. I didn't just need to cry on someone's shoulder and said, "I don't know what's going on. I don't know who I am in this, and I don't know how to relate to my kids, and my hair's gone, and I've got no energy. I don't, there's too many, all the
Mm.
things are moving." Then by the autumn, I guess it was about rebuilding rather than just who am I, where am I? And I found quite a few therapists don't like the label of ADHD, so I made it quite difficult, not intentionally, but I really was trying to find somebody that understood neurodiversity rather than wanting to ignore it as a label. Um, and it and it took me a while, and I found the most amazing person, and we did meet up maybe 6, 8, 10 times, and she just felt like a really good friend, and we did some good deep therapy, but it was just didn't feel like she was trying to fix me, and she definitely wasn't uncomfortable with any of the stuff I wanted to talk about.
That's so important.
Yeah, yeah. And
How did having ADHD, and then I'm assuming you had your diagnosis of ADHD before your breast cancer diagnosis.
yeah, just a few months before. Yeah.
So how did I guess I don't even know, like, how was that whole experience? I guess medications for chemo. Were you taking? Do you take medication for ADHD? Do you feel that
So yeah, it's a really good question. So at the time, I thought it couldn't possibly make any difference, and then a few months in, I just happened to Google ADHD and breast cancer. Just was there any way that my ADHD was making this whole process more complicated for me? And that really helped me to be a lot kinder to myself, because I would often go in and talk to the oncologist, and she was brilliant, but I'd get myself in a pickle because you can get very overwhelmed with all the information. So actually the thing you needed to talk to her about was something that was so far from your mind, even if it's from a list, because of the overwhelm. And there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which can be really challenging. So you just assume that the doctor or the nurse or anyone you're going to see thinks it's a waste of time before you've even got in the room. So any concerns you have, it puts you off going in, or it makes it into much bigger of a deal than it really is. It made it quite challenging for me, I think, in asking for help again, because that whole thing of I'm in my 50s. A lot of our friends are in those sandwich years of the kids busy, parents need time. So no one's going to have the capacity to help me. So why on earth would I go and talk to anyone? And so I think and one thing that sort of, I think it might have even been Chat GPT I went on to. It's kind of quite a nice way of filtering out the rubbish and just to kind of, how does breast cancer and ADHD overlap and like create issues? It was just the whole thing of looking after yourself. So you could get up in the morning and think, I'm going to make myself a juice, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to do this. And if I've got work to do, or if I've got to prioritize something, I'll do it. And you don't do any of those things because other stuff sidetracks you and you get very distracted.
yeah.
Like a lot of women with breast cancer, you might overthink stuff, but just go and hyper focus on things that aren't always helpful. You can tell yourself it's productive and it's not. So I don't think it's probably significantly different from anyone that's struggling with a diagnosis, but I think, and I wasn't taking meds at the time, so it didn't affect me, and there shouldn't be an issue with anyone taking ADHD meds through breast cancer treatment, but it'll be a case by case situation. But I think that for me, I realised there suddenly, and I went to Future Dreams House. I went to a couple of places where there's some incredibly upbeat, amazing people, and without realising it, I was feeling like a total failure. Like I am not managing to put my game face on, and all these people are. And you look at the people on Instagram and they're so amazing and encouraging, but again, you sort of put all these people in a category and see them as all the other people are coping with this diagnosis better. And it's a segue from the whole ADHD thing, but I think what I missed at the time were people that had been diagnosed and weren't superhuman and were just kind of having an everyday experience of going through the treatment and coming out the other side, of which there are gazillions. And if you're hundreds of thousands, you know, there are lots of people come out the other
Yeah.
side okay. And of course there are lots of people that aren't. But it's the ones that aren't okay, or the ones that are doing really well psychologically or using social media, that it can be tricky not to get the balance. And I'm sure that has nothing to do with the ADHD, but that was one of the things at the time that I think made it all a bit overwhelming. Because I think it's sometimes it is the overwhelm, the overstimulation of it all.
And if those are challenges kind of in your day-to-day life with your ADHD, and then you throw breast cancer in the mix, which basically becomes like, I just know from my own experience of my diagnosis, my headspace was just, there's a hell of a lot suddenly you're having to understand, mental amounts of appointments, like,
The whole appointment thing, and remembering to juggle stuff and pull people in to help you if you can, just to take some of the heat off.
Obviously, we are talking for OWise. The OWise app is very, very good in terms of kind of supporting people in that way as well, in terms of managing appointments. I always joked I didn't know about the OWise app when I was diagnosed.
Oh,
but
me neither. I wish I'd known.
And I remember doing a real being like, I need a cancer PA. Like, I genuinely think when you get cancer, you need to be given a PA who can keep track of all your appointments and stuff, because I was feeling so massively overwhelmed by that and all the different specialists I was seeing. And it became like, it was literally, a lot when you're also, life is a lot anyway.
Yeah. And I think there's some good apps out there, because part of it is tracking things, because you start to think I'm not getting any better, or I'm getting so much worse. And then tracking it helps you just to see, oh yeah, no, I felt this way before. Or actually, no, I'm getting better. And I think that's where digital's amazing. Yeah.
And so, and how would you say now in terms of, because lots of people do speak about life after cancer being quite a difficult, challenging time. And I think a lot of the time that can be probably because we focus on that end goal, right? Get through treatment, tick it off. Like, that feels like the big, big mountain to climb. And then you're kind of left with, we're saying about the medical appointments. One minute you don't want to have loads of medical appointments, and the next you have none. And suddenly you're like, oh, this is weird, because you can almost get used to your new normal. So how have you found kind of finishing treatment and finding your feet again? And I can see your hair is growing back beautifully. And we were just talking before about how you've dyed it recently and stuff. So there is a lot that comes after with changed image and changed mindsets and all sorts of things that diagnosis can give us.
So I think thankfully I had a couple of friends that had breast cancer the year before me, so I'd sort of tracked their sort of how it had been for them, and they were amazing because it had been so recent. And they said, and I was picking it up from other people, there was this kind of looming wait for the end. It's, there's kind of, you fall off the edge of a cliff and so I think I was sort of conscious that was going to happen, and potentially because of that I was sort of prepared for it. And I think because we were relocating, I had other things to focus on. That's the hardest thing, because you're sort of, it's having something to focus on other than my treatment, because it's just having a rhythm. And I think because I'm freelance, I didn't have a job to go back to. I don't have little kids running around at home, or I didn't have any sort of normal to go back to.
Mhm.
And so I think that in itself created more of a challenge than the sort of breast cancer, lack of appointments, and then plugging into a new trust in a new county meant that I was still dipping in. And it's not like an addiction, but there's definitely a little bit of a, okay, I've been in a room with a doctor. It's going to be like, I
Yeah.
feel a little bit better psychologically. So that, I think that's what we're talking about, and that's what you don't get. And the GP has 10 minutes and rarely has the kind of insights that you were looking for. Because every time you go for a treatment, someone's saying, how are you? How's your sleep? How's the this? And you're like, oh,
Mm.
it's so nice that you asked.
Yeah, you
Not
feel
normally ask
quite
that.
you feel quite like wrapped in a warm blanket,
Yeah,
isn't it, in a way? Obviously, the treatment is not a warm blanket and things
yeah,
like that, but the people
totally.
around you that really
Yeah,
are asking those, really caring about your answers as well, right?
yeah.
And
And I think what I realise is a strange thing, but you get poked and prodded, and you have a lot of it's not that you're not treated with any dignity, but you have to cast that aside. And as you're lying there having your radiotherapy or post surgery, and even when you're having treatment, there's a bit of it's not intimacy, but there's a bit of touch, and there's a bit of taking your blood pressure. You underestimate
mm,
all these little things, and so it was quite funny when I went in recently, and the doctor's just sort of checking glands, and I thought, gosh, isn't it funny we get so busy in life that we don't even the hugs and the touch, we just kind of forget how nice it is. And I think sometimes there's more than just doctor's insight. There's an awful lot going on when you've been through surgery and not so nice scans, of a gentle touch. And I
mm,
think there's so much caught up in the post breast cancer of being kind to our bodies and ourselves and knowing what we need. And it's quite hard sometimes to ask for that or seek it out or prioritize it. So I'm trying hard to think of ways to do that, because I think I may not notice the difference, but it will have an accumulative effect, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, I think that's such an important observation, and I think it's that very weird kind of, is it a paradox where you get this awful diagnosis and have all the fears that come with it and all the horrible stuff, but that flip side of that carved out, you're forced to slow down, you're forced to pause, you're forced
Mm.
to kind of pull back a bit on work, whether it's work or social life or this, or and you are sat, given teas, coffees, whatever it is. Yeah, there is a slowing down that
Mm.
happens, and it's maybe the first time lots of people do slow down and sit down and get
Yeah,
looked after in
yeah,
in this period. For a lot of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, it's a period of time where you have been raising little kids maybe, or working really hard in a full on job, and you're not giving yourself that space. So it's a yeah,
mm.
it can be the first time, weirdly.
Yeah. And I think that I think there's an amazing community out there, and I realised how few people know about it. I think I mean, being in London, it was easier in
Mm.
that it doesn't take long for someone to mention Future Dreams or a Maggie Centre, or that there are places um, to go that are designed. Like Maggie centres are all designed. Their architecture is an architecture of hope, and since learning more about gardening and garden design, I fully appreciate how they've created that, and it's amazing. And I would never have understood what underpinned it. And I think that there's places like that that's really worth going to if people are feeling alone
Mm.
or struggling, because connection with the right people is hard to find sometimes. I think if you're single, or even if you're a couple or you got kids, but just don't want to talk about it too much at home. Some people really like to separate the cancer diagnosis and how they feel about it from their everyday life. And
Yeah,
it took me a while, but I realized how very differently people cope with it, and knowing yourself well enough to know who to go to and perhaps who not to engage in conversation too deeply, because it's not always helpful.
well, And like you said earlier, it's a really hard thing for people to hold, the fears
Yeah.
that you're left with, and I think it's really common to try and protect those people closest to you. So
Yeah.
that for me is when the community became so important, because I didn't need to spell out to them that I had a triple negative diagnosis and the risk of recurrence is quite high. And if it recurs, this was the stuff I was sitting with, but not
Yeah.
really wanting to really vocally tell friends and family, because
Yeah.
then they would just be scared too. So it does become that thing where you really just need to be able to be with people that can hold that space and hold those fears for you. And yeah, I think it does help, that little bit of separation. And that's where
Yeah.
cases like Future Dreams became just so important to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to know, for anyone watching, that there is these amazing communities out there, and there is that no one is alone. Yes, you might not find someone that's had the exact diagnosis as you, but hopefully you will. There's even charities, breast cancer now have that, someone like me.
Yeah, I was going to mention them because I spoke to
Yeah,
them. So helpful. So it was a lady who was a year or two ahead. She'd had HER2 positive. She was my sort of age. She was postmenopausal. And it was just really good to chat to someone and ask a bunch of questions because you just narrowed down the differences. Obviously, you're
yeah,
still going to have your own sort of lives that are different, but it really helped because they're trained and equipped.
yeah,
I get to know what to ask, what not to talk about, or just they do their own thing. But yeah, breast cancer now is amazing. That was my one place I'd go to if I had questions, like
yeah.
online and in person. They're great.
That's incredible. It's all of these resources, and yeah,
Hmm.
things that are out there are so important, because you can feel like you are drifting at sea, especially to
Yeah.
start with. And so yeah, and if anyone is watching and is kind of at that stage of diagnosis and just completely, like we're saying, you just feel like you are literally at sea with barely a life jacket to keep you afloat. Is there anything that kind of helped you at that time, or you would like to impart to them, any kind of wisdom having come through it? Because I think that is just so important for the community, for us all to kind of support one another with things that helped us.
Oh, golly. Well, I'm slightly biased because I love knitting, and I did a lot of knitting, and then connect with people that were knitting at places like Future Dreams. I would highly recommend Macmillan, Maggie's, Future Dreams. Find somewhere locally. If you do enough Googling and enough asking around and where you're getting treatment, or just through people that have had it in the past, you will find places that are often doing, whether it's yoga or treatments or groups. It's not for everyone, but I would say give it a go, because you may not think you need it and you might get on okay without it. But it might be that in helping someone else, you actually feel like, oh, okay, this is not just about me receiving. There are things that I can give back, or maybe you will receive something in the way of company or wisdom that you didn't
Mm.
know would help. So whether it's through an activity, fun sort of art thing, or a kind of actual practical breast cancer related chat, I would highly recommend that. I would also say there's a lot of rubbish out there about what you should and shouldn't do and what can cause it, and just be really mindful of filtering that out, because I know there are things that can cause it, but mostly it's just really bad luck and it's not our fault. And it's really important to hold tight onto that truth, because even medical professionals can say things that can leave you slightly unsettled. And just to, I think once I realized that actually I could eat all the healthy food in the world and be super fit and have the best relationships. But if I can't actually live in this moment right now, and if I zoom off to the future and start chopping up the past to work out what I should or shouldn't have done, I'm going to miss out on this moment right now. And there's lots of nows added together with my family and friends, and even with me, that is going to make life going forward much richer um and yeah, and a better life, I think. better's a word, but so I think for those sort of were the two things: is connecting with people, but knowing when to draw back and just look after myself, and focusing on the now. And some of that is like what I, perhaps what I do with my life, my career. And so it might be an amazing opportunity for someone to rethink what they're doing. Like, is this really what I want to be doing? But I think these sorts of moments do that for people anyway.
Exactly.
You
Big
don't
change,
much
and
notice it happens. Yeah.
it can make you evaluate a lot of stuff in your life and how you want to move forward, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And I think
that's really good advice, really good advice.
I think the last thing is probably just the people you're closest to. And this is my opinion. This isn't like I don't know what you think about this, Carly, but your children, your spouses, they are thinking the stuff that they're not talking about, that you're thinking about. They are dealing with it or not dealing with it. So actually not talking about it doesn't stop it from entering their mind. And whether it's getting some help or some input, or not a mediator, but someone to help you talk about it, I think it happened naturally for us just because of our circumstances. But I think if there's a way that would really help you and them to have a healthy conversation around the diagnosis and the treatment, I think that can then make the whole experience a more healthy one. I don't know what you think about that, because
I
maybe
would
that's
say
not.
no. I think that is so important, and I think that often, like over the years, I'm obviously a lot further out of treatment than you are, but I found it really hard, but then I was kind of okay. Whereas I think my husband didn't have that opportunity, and it had been such a crazy time. So yeah, the carers or the partners, they really need that time as well to be cared for and looked after too, actually. And they are going through it as well. And when it comes to children, mine were a lot younger than your children, but they're picking up on stuff. And if you're not talking to them about it, then especially I knew that with my kids, they were young ages, especially at that young age, they can start to think their minds can just run away with them if you're not honest about what is going on, and obviously be honest in an age appropriate way. That's that kind of goes without saying, but I'm a big believer in energy anyway. So they're going to sense, like, if I was feeling sad about something, my little girl, she was only 4 at the time, she'd be like, "Are you okay, Mummy? You're not okay. I can feel that you're not okay," even though I'd be smiling, so they're picking up on energy, and they need to be made to feel safe. And by feeling safe, it's by being honest and saying, "You're right, actually, I am feeling sad today," or whatever. It's important. So, and there is incredible support out there for partners as well. There's incredible support for children. It is a case of maybe us reaching out to charities and then being signposted, but there is all of this stuff is out there. My husband had some counselling with a charity, and he really valued it.
I think what you said about being age appropriate and person appropriate, because I think so I think those would be my main things. I think that things like OWise, and there's a lot, even the Future Dreams, Maggie, some of them are online. You don't have to be doing it in person. So I think places you can go to, it helps to make a phone call or in person, be there in person at some point, because not everything's online. But I think there's a lot available for people. I think it's tough if you're working full time, so to be connected. But I mean, I'm going on a copper trek in June, which is an opportunity for me. I did the moonwalk last year, and doing this, I found it's not so much the fundraising element of it. Obviously, I want to fundraise for people that have been a massive support for me during this, so that they can do more for other people. That's why we do it. But actually, I think for me going forward, and maybe for others, there is something about connecting with people that have been through a similar thing, and facing a challenge together. So we've all been facing our own challenges individually, but there's something about doing it as a body of people. No
Claire,
one winning,
I've done
no one
two.
losing.
I've done
Yes.
two copper treks, and when I say like my whole body is lighting up for you, because it is so transformative. And
Yeah.
the first one I did was 6 months after finishing treatment, and I really wasn't feeling physically good at all. However, I went on that as still feeling like a patient, and I left feeling like me again. It is an
Amazing.
amazing thing to do. You're going to love it, and it's tough, but that, so is getting through treatment for breast cancer, right?
Yeah,
That you did that, so that will be. I'm so excited for you.
yeah. And I've heard some great stories, so I've no doubt I'll come back with a few of my own.
Yeah. It's an amazing experience. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. It's been, really good to hear your story and hear your amazing advice and amazing things I'm going to go away from now and be like, actually, I really need to take that on board more as well. So thank you
Oh,
so much. And
thanks for all you're doing, Carly. It's very encouraging seeing you online and all that you're doing. I'm sure behind the scenes that we don't see. I know
thank
you're
you.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Busy.
mean, as we said, I think when you've got so much from people. For me, I feel like I know the value that had to my whole journey experience with my
Yeah.
diagnosis, and I would not have got through some really dark moments without others that had kind of paved the way to say, you're going to come through it. So if we can do that, I think it's pretty powerful stuff. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, brilliant.
And
Well,
hopefully
good seeing
and
you.
then I'm sure the next time I speak to you, this beautiful hair, it's growing
I know.
so fast, so
I might
fast.
have
It's
to just
amazing.
accept the dark brown hair. It came back really, really dark and very curly. So I just
It,
decided to colour it, and it's a bit extreme, but it's quite
I think
fun.
it looks fabulous. You look fabulous, Claire. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully seeing you in person, online
Yeah.
again very soon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Take
you
care.
take care.
Bye.